Well, good evening and welcome to this year's first event of the Rewilding Planet Earth series at Boston College. I'm Tara Pisani-Garreau. I'm the director of the Environmental Studies program that is sponsoring this event along with the Institute for Liberal Arts. We're so excited that you have taken the time out of your busy schedules to learn about the spectacular landscapes and species of Chilean Patagonia and the inspiring work of Rewilding Chile that is the legacy of Tompkins Conservation. So as you know, the news on the current state of the planet's biodiversity is sobering, but it's not too late to turn things around by ambitiously protecting wildlands and marine ecosystems and bringing back species through intentional, equitable, and holistic restoration work. This is our charge over the next several decades, and to get there, we need a vision for what's possible and models of successful conservation. Tonight is one such model that we hope will inspire, engage, and activate our community to rewild planet Earth. We invite you, the audience, to be part of tonight's conversation by submitting questions or comments within the Q&A feature of this webinar. We'll start the Q&A around 7:40 with a couple questions of our own, and we'll end the webinar by about 8 p.m. This webinar has a live transcript feature, which you can turn on in your menu bar. Introducing tonight's speaker and co-moderating the Q&A portion is my friend and colleague, Juan Sebastián Montes. Juan is an associate professor of the practice in the Carroll School of Management, where he teaches undergraduate and graduate classes in strategy, organizational behavior, and strategic thinking. A native of Chile, Juan has a fascinating multidisciplinary background. He earned a law degree specializing in tax and corporate law at the University of Chile, and then went on to earn his PhD in business administration and development at the Business School of the University of Navarra in Barcelona, Spain. And prior to his academic career, Juan worked in both the private and public sectors. He was the CEO of Aqua Chile and Salmo Food, two companies that export over 3.8 billion in salmon products for Chile. And then from 2010 to 2012, he served as the governor of the Los Lagos region in southern Chile, overseeing public services and programs, managing the annual budget and public investments, and maintaining order and security in the region that is in the heart of Patagonia. In this position as the governor of Los Lagos in Patagonia, Juan Sebastián got to personally know and collaborate with our guest speaker this evening, Carolina Morgado, and her colleagues, Chris and Doug Tompkins. Throughout his life, he's also been a professional mountain climber, leading over 30 expeditions in the Himalayas, the Andes, Yosemite, in the Sierra Nevada, and in the Alps. He is among a small group of mountaineers who has reached the summit of Mount Everest. So Juan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'll invite you to turn on your video and your audio.
Okay,
and I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you for the invitation to participate here. I'm so excited to introduce you, Carolina Morgado. Carolina and a lot of people that work with her are close friends. We used to live in the same city. And Carolina has been connected with Tompkins Conservation for the last 25 years. She was at the beginning and is at the end, and she has been monitoring all this process and living all this process. Think about this, it's 25 years, you know, and the dream was to buy land and transform this land into conservation. And it was incredibly difficult. There was a lot of political issues for 20 years or so with the government. And finally, she, helping Doug and Chris Tompkins, helped to create the largest donation on Earth. I will repeat, it's the largest donation in Earth. They donate land, she will explain in detail, to the state of Chile to create national parks, 7 national parks, and expand another 3 ones. Today, Carolina is the executive director of Rewilding Chile, which is an offspring of Tompkins Conservation. And the organization that she leads is basically focused on creating a route to the national parks and also restoring ecosystem, manage endangered species, and also create more links with the communities. Sorry, I don't know why my phone is ringing. So she is great. What she has been doing in Rewilding Chile is really amazing, and she will use beautiful photos to show my region, her region, to you and to the rest of the world. So thank you for this invitation, Tara, and let's go for it. Carolina.
You can only protect the things that you love if you identify with them.
We are Rewilding Chile, the legacy of Christine and Douglas Tompkins, who decided at the beginning of the 90s to dedicate their lives to conserving the beauty and biodiversity of the Chilean Patagonia. We work to face the species extinction and climate change crisis through rewilding as a comprehensive conservation strategy for the Chilean Patagonia by means of creating national parks.
If you just buy large tracts of land and you put a lock on the front door and it's regenerating itself, or it's staying within its pristine state, you're missing over half of the impact that you can have by getting people onto these landscapes and helping them identify with a non-human world, which is, of course, so tragic today, that there is this incredible chasm between human nature and the non-human world. So anyway, it's kind of how I see it.
We promote ecological restoration and the active management of threatened species, such as the Wemwell deer, Darwin's rhea, puma, and condor. And we collaborate with the Chilean government to create marine and terrestrial conservation mirrors, key to the resilience of the planet. We work with the communities surrounding national parks because we know that the success of conservation depends on proud and empowered communities who may progress in harmony with nature, becoming defenders of their territory. We believe the world can be more wild, beautiful, and equitable. To achieve this, all of us are needed.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you, Juan Sebastián and Tara and the Boston College for the invitation. Well, it's a good thing that I am going to be kind of like sharing with you the information we saw on that little video. And so we are Fundación Rewilding Chile. We are an organization that was funded by Douglas and Christine Tompkins. Their background is Douglas was a mountaineer like Juan Sebastián is, and also a founder of the North Face company when he was very young. In his middle age, he founded the Esprit de Corps company, an apparel company. But by the time he was less than 50 years old, he decided that he was doing things nobody needed and decided to sell the company and put all this money into creating a foundation that was dedicated to conserving the world and to fighting like the biggest crisis we are confronting. Chris, on the other side, his wife, she has been the CEO and also part of the funders of Patagonia Inc. this company that today is everywhere in the news because the owners donated the totality of the company to a non-profit organization to fight climate change. So we can see that the backgrounds of these two great, I would say, visionaries in terms of conservation, they came together and founded this organization, first of all called Foundation for Deep Ecology. Before it was Tompkins Conservation, and they were giving grants around the world for, especially for activism and also organic agriculture, that it's really where conservation starts, and all kinds of environmental projects. But also, and very interesting, along those years, Doug developed what he called building the intellectual infrastructure. And this was a series of books that won all kinds of prizes, and that we are still making these books today. Many of them are on the national parks we have helped created, but also on the many subjects that are damaging or our natural world. That is, for example, welfare ranching that deals with the subsidized grazing in public lands, or fatal harvest, the tragedy of industrial agriculture. These are huge coffee table books, but written with the collaboration of like avant-garde thinkers on the matters. And also in Chile, the first book we ever did was The Tragedy of the Chilean Forest, being Chile a country that comes with an extractive economy using the natural resources. This was a book that really put the Tompkins Conservation, the Tompkins family on the news, and this was in 1995. What Tompkins Conservation has created is a global conservation network, and we call it like that because we have been working basically since 1995 in two countries, Chile and Argentina. In these parks, we have created a total of 14 national parks, 7 in Chile and 7 in Argentina. And buying the parks is one part of it, because what we try to achieve every time we make a park, it's a complete ecosystem. And that is where rewilding comes into the picture. And the way also we buy land has always been that we identify land that is for sale, always big scale conservation, but we always identify where these lands are surrounded by public lands, so we can trigger additional conservation to create as large as possible conservation and recuperating ecosystems. As I said, in Chile and Argentina, we have worked with maybe 30 different species. I put some of the pictures here, and in every one of them, the idea is to bring back a species that has been extinct, but also in the cases where species are really diminished, do reproduction centers or do using different strategies to bring back healthy populations. There. This is, oops, sorry. This is where Rewilding Chile and Rewilding Argentina come into the picture. Until a few years ago, we worked under the umbrella of Tompkins Conservation, but a few years ago, Douglas Tompkins passed away, and Christine Tompkins did a succession plan because he wanted, well, Doug never wanted, Doug and Chris never wanted their organization to be known by their name, but more about what we do, and our strategy on the ground is rewilding. That is the way we embrace our work through ecological restoration, and that is how we created these two organizations, independent organization, but with the support of Tompkins Conservation, but we follow the same vision and mission, and that vision deals with counteracting the biggest crises that are affecting this world, that is the loss of biodiversity, and of course the climate crisis that we are living through today. And what is rewilding? I mean, rewilding means helping nature heal, giving a space back to wildlife on land or on the ocean through large-scale restoration of the ecosystem. But also rewilding means, it has a lot of different meanings. And one of the meanings is also an active management there. I mean, I could take away a piece of land and never touch it again and wait for nature to heal. And that is one way of doing rewilding. Another way of doing rewilding is that I do certain actions so the restoration happens quickly. And that is how we embrace our work here in Chile and of course in Argentina, but from now on, I am going to refer specifically to the work in Chile. The way we do it, as I was saying, is by big tracts of land, because we know that the bigger the scale, the more we can promote the ecological process, and allow for them to follow. In these lands that we buy, we do the ecological restoration, be it removing fences, taking away domestic animals, different kinds of action depending on each one of the properties we have bought. And in every case, we work with the communities. We have worked along these 27 years in many ways with the communities, be it by building the parks, by creating different productive projects with the adjacent communities. But today, our community outreach program deals with engaging the gateway communities, which in Chile, are most of the time very humble, small towns with people that maybe have never either value or even go into the national park that is right around their village. So what we do with them is invite them to know the place, because we know that when you know the place and you identify with it, you start loving it. And therefore, you will probably become the first line of defense of that territory. What we did, and it's well known, we made in 2018, we make a historic donation to the state of Chile. We donated 1.2 million acres that trigger 11 million acres of protection. And why we do this is because our strategy also has been to strengthening the public system. We could have remained all of those parks as private parks, but we know that being national parks and being on the hands of the state, although it could be under finance or it could be weaker, we know that they will remain as national parks in the long term. Chile, which is a country that has a long tradition it has a Republican tradition, as we call it, in national parks. Since 1926, every president of Chile has made at least one national park during its administration, and we appeal to that legacy to work with we have worked with 6 different administrations. We appeal to that legacy for them to accept our donation and create these parks. In terms of park creation, I'm going to show you the parks we have created, but this picture here is just to inspire you. It's a picture on the Strait of Magellan of a property we just bought in November with the help of of a group of donors that help us buy this 220,000 acre property, totally pristine, that we want to be our next national park for Chile, the national park number 45, because 44 was made this week in the northern Chile. So this is our priority project to come, and we want that when we donate, when we propose this to the government to donate as a national park, that also triggers ocean conservation, because we want to create conservation mirrors, because life doesn't stop at the shore. So many of species, say like penguins, they eat on the ocean, but they live outside on the ground, and that's where they reproduce. So many species are like that. So conservation, when it's possible, should go all the way from the land to the ocean. As I said, these are the national parks we have created. They're all along in what is called in Chile Patagonia, which is 1/3 of Chile. And we have created these 7 national parks. We have expanded other 3. We have donated 1 million acres. We have triggered big conservation with this. We have worked with many administrations. And of all of these parks, in 2 of them, we have developed model parks that I will show you in a little bit. These are some pictures that I wanted to show you to inspire you why we protect these beauties, these incredible, pristine, untouched landscapes in southern Chile. This is Pumalín National Park, Pumalín from above, Corcovado National Park. This is also in the high waters of the same parks. And it's incredible how the tree line goes all the way into the ocean. A million acres of untouched forest, primeval forest to temperate rainforest. This is Yandegaya National Park on the Beagle Channel. Yandegaya also, beautiful, beautiful glaciers and Darwin's mountain range on the back. Cerro Castillo National Park, also created in 2018. Patagonia National Park, one of our model parks. This is Queulat National Park, also on the route. And when I was saying that of all of these parks that we have helped created, there are 2 parks, Pumalín, Douglas Tompkins National Park, and Patagonia National Park, where what we did is we use very much the tradition that you can see in the United States, where you have an incredible, great national park system. We took these 2 parks, and in the case of Pumalín, we started buying the land in 1993, and we turned it into a national park in 2018. But along all those years, we developed, a world-class public access infrastructure, little hotels, never competing with adjacent towns, a network of trails, housing for employees, camping areas. And we always kept it open to the public. You had to pay at the beginning $1 to camp, but we used to say, you have to pay always a nominal fee, but you don't have to have money. The important thing is that you experience what is camping under an old growth forest, because that will change your life. And the same thing in the 3 pictures below, we did it with Patagonia National Park. We bought this sheep estancia in 2004, and in a process of 15 years, we bought it with 25,000 animals and sheep. But by the time, we bought it like in August, and in November, all the new sheep were born. So in a couple of months, we owned like 40,000 sheep. And in a process of 14 years, we took down 400 kilometers of fences that would allow all the guanacos to come back, that I'm going to show you pictures. We start monitoring the different wildlife, how they interact with the rest of the species now that we were taking down the domestic animals. We start building the same first-class infrastructure for public access, the same hotels, camping areas, long trails, multi-day trails, picnic areas, and beautiful signage, everything really focused on beauty. And these 2 parks, we wanted to show the government that when you invest in national parks, they can become engines to local economy. And we proved that along the years of how that triggered new visits to those small communities around those parks. These 2 parks now are in the hands of the National Park System of Chile. Nevertheless, we continue to have a long-term collaboration agreement with the National Park System, and we work inside those parks with our wildlife monitoring programs. In terms of ecological restoration, these are the main species we have been working in Pumalín and in Patagonia National Park. In Patagonia National Park, we work with a huemul deer, which is A very emblematic deer for us is on our national emblem. It's on the verge of extinction. There's only 1,500 left. And we work also with the condor. We work with the rescue center of rapacious birds. And when condors come there totally damaged by different, human-made situations, we work with them and we bring them to Patagonia National Park for a period of climatizing, and then we set them free when they're ready to fly again. We are working with small cats, Geoffrey's cat, Colo-Colo cats. There's very little information in Patagonia about them, but there's 5 species of small cats. So we are working with Pantera, with the Pantera project in Pumalín and in Patagonia National Park. In the case of the pumas, we have been working since the very beginning in Patagonia National Park with the puma, because as I was saying, when we started to turning in our biggest rewilding program, turning in the estancia from a sheep estancia to a national park, we needed to see the interaction between the puma and the huemul deer, who was really in danger. But we wanted to see if this diminishing of the domestic animals would affect the huemul population because of puma prey. But it didn't. We find out what he likes to eat. And we have been monitoring for many years. Right now, what we're doing with the puma is that we are focusing the monitoring program in the interaction with the public, because now the public comes there and the pumas are in front of the information center or the restaurant, and we want people to be careful, to be aware, to be informed, but also to recognize that when you see big predators in an ecosystem, it's good news. It means it's a healthy and complete ecosystem. In case of the Darwin's rhea, when we started, not when we started the project, but a few years after, there were less than 20 individuals. So we created a reproduction center for the Darwin's rhea, and today we have 70 Darwin's rhea roaming in Patagonian steppe, free and happy, but we continue because we want to arrive to about 100, but with healthy subpopulations. And these are very, the Ñandú or Darwin's rhea plays a very important role in this Patagonian steppe ecosystem, because they disperse the seeds. And this is a big part of our rewilding project, because we recuperated 100,000 acres of Patagonian steppe when we did all this rewilding program in this, what is now Patagonia National Park. These are some pictures. So here we see what does it mean rewilding. In this case, we capture the pumas, we color them, and we monitor their interactions and also their, their behavior patterns, how they move around, what are the places they visit. We have 30 colored pumas in Patagonia National Park. That's a cute one. Guanacos, these are the ones who came back big time when we took down the 400 kilometers of fences progressively. Yeah? We didn't take them all at the same time. It took us many years, and working with in summer times with volunteers from everywhere in the world. And actually Patagonia, the company, promote and send many volunteers of their own workers to come and help in this program. And the guanaco is the puma's best choice for eating. So they were very happy in this new interaction. And guanacos are roaming everywhere now. It's impressive. I mean, they're right there around the hotel, around the restaurant. I don't know if you guys have seen our Great National Parks, this Netflix series that is narrated by Barack Obama. And in chapter number 2, you can see the restoration projects of the guanacos in Patagonia National Park. Highly recommended. They have a special face. There is condors flying. We put radios also in the condors. And in this project, we work in collaboration with another foundation in Chile, Fundación Meri, that provides all the technical and accessories to monitor the condors once they are free. Here's the Darwin's rhea. Sometimes we bring eggs from another area of Patagonian steppe, and we bring them here to improve the genetics also. We bring birds, but also eggs. Different years, we do different systems. Here more, they're still there, they're not released. And now, as I was saying, working with the cats who have been very difficult to catch and to put collars on them. We haven't been able to do it yet, but we do have the camera traps, and we have identified where they are, but we weren't successful. We hope to be successful this next season. In the case of the huemul deers, the same, because huemul deers are so fragile. You know, they only live in Chile and Argentina. There's only 1,500 left totally between Chile and Argentina. They are very shy and they're very slow. And Patagonia National Park is surrounded by one town, and many feral dogs come, you know, dogs that are abandoned come and they kill them. So we monitor also the threats. The threats, dogs come from the community, cows come from the community, cows transmit diseases, dogs kill them. So another important work is to monitor with camera traps, with camera traps and with constant park guards that we have on our team, the situation of the huemul deer. And in terms of the huemul deer, we are working also always with the government, because we want this to be a public policy in the end. On a national huemul corridor, we have identified 10 places where there are subpopulations of huemul deer. We're already working in 4 of them. We hope to work in the coming years in these 10 different places. We are never going to be able to connect these 10 different geographical areas, but we will be able to strengthening the subpopulation in this area to avoid extinction. And in terms of community, as I was saying, these parks are surrounded by small communities, most of them, in some of them, some bigger towns. And we work with them on environmental education. We want to reach a local identity, so they really feel identified with these places. And we want to, what we do is encourage to a certain governance that allows them to be an active member and participant of the destiny of that national park. And it's been beautiful. We work with the community in general. We work with the schools, depends on the place and depends on the program that we are working on. We also work, we do a lot of excursions. We do different workshops to feel them more identified. Here you see a picture. We did a passport of all these parks along Patagonia. So people are encouraged to visit them, to get the stamp on them, and see you. And our big vision in this territory where we have created, in this map, we have created 7 of those 17 national parks that you see there, is that this is recognized as the root of parks of Patagonia, because we know also that putting an economic development component to conservation is an important strategy for people to value conservation. So we have been working on this ecological or conservation landscape where there is over 60 communities, 2,800 kilometers, 3 regions, and this area, this Patagonian area where we work, concentrates 91% of the acreage protected under National Park in Chile. So we work here with the National Tourism Board, with the National Park Agency, and with all the local communities, travel agencies, etc., to promote this conservation tourism destination. And why we should protect this? Because it concentrates 91% of the territory, and when it comes to conservation, big scale matters, because it's 11.8 million acres of pristine ecosystems. And also we did the study with Nat Geo Earth Pulse program a few years ago, and we did the carbon sequestration measure of the root of parks, and it captures 3 times more per hectare than the Amazon, being of course the Amazon much bigger than this territory. But this number tells you how productive this old growth forest, these water systems, this understory is. And, we know there is important work to be done, and there we are all needed. So thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. That was a fabulous overview of the incredibly impactful work of Rewilding Chile. Thank you for giving the history of its relationship to Tompkins conservation. So one of my, I guess, first questions, and one, please join me, and we'll get to some questions that we have in the Q&A. One of my first questions for you is about the relationship with cattle ranchers in the region that historically were there, are probably still there. And, their objective is to raise herds of animals to get them to market and protect them from predators. And meanwhile, the conservation is trying to protect top predators. So how has that relationship evolved? And actually, one of our students submitted a question of how do you incorporate conservation while still keeping the gaucho culture? So I think it relates to that question.
Yes. Well, that's a really good question. And it's a question that it's a work in progress. In some of the areas where we have created parks, for example, Pumalin National Park, and maybe many of the projects which are really temperate rainforest or forest in general, this hasn't been an issue, and this has been, although very controversial when we started making these projects, because people were thinking that, they were thinking that we were trying to do all kinds of stuff, creating a nuclear waste dump, or, wanting to take out the cows and bring American bisons. We were accused of everything in the 1990s. It wasn't that funny then, but it's really funny now. We were accused of everything, that we wanted to create a Jewish state. There were all kinds of things because people didn't understand environmental philanthropy. That's one thing. So it was controversial no matter what, because buying big tracts of land is controversial. The only thing is that to think about that other people are buying big tracts of land to do extractive projects, and we were trying to do conservation projects. So in most of the lands, the controversy was more in a lack of understanding of an environmental culture. But answering to your question, in the case when we turn this big estancia into a national park, is that after probably, I would say, 100 years of grazing, the land was totally overgrazed. And the reason why the owners were selling this big estancia and that we bought it is because it wasn't economical viable anymore. So was it controversial? Yes, we ran into a lot of opposition because of what the other alumni was saying, the gaucho culture. And when it comes to that, when it comes to tradition and culture, I think emotions are more important for the person than the rational. You don't want to talk about overgrazing. You want to talk about what my grandfather did, what my dad did, what I am doing. But we have never bought land from people that didn't want to sell it in the first place. We don't do that, of course. We don't pressure people to sell. So we did it with one estancia that wasn't economical viable to do it. Do we still have conflicts with the neighbors? Yes, we do. Because as I was showing you at the beginning with that book, Welfare Ranching, the conflict of production and conservation is historic. And I think, and obviously we totally understand that you're not going to turn the world into a national park. And we don't want to impose or change the way people develop, small farmers and all of that. But there has to be a place for everything. There has to be a place for your production and for your traditional way of living. And there has to be a space for conservation, because look at where we are in this world right now, because we haven't respect, or we haven't really find a balance with that. Now, what we do with that is that we have conflicts, but also we have good relationships in terms of respecting the borders. So when you make a national park, the first thing you have to do is have clear borders. When you make a park, because when in the national park, we don't take care of it, but when you make a park, the first thing you have to do is identify and have clear borders with your neighbors. So we all know in which land we are doing what we're doing. It's not easy, but we totally understand, and we are working on that on a day-to-day basis, that there has to be harmony, and we have to be good neighbors, because there needs to be a space for everything.
Thank you. That's a great response. Juan, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I want to add a comment.
Okay.
I think Carolina is not necessarily reflecting or she said, now it's funny, but 20 years ago was very tough. And I have to say, this is totally right, because the first 10, 15 years was kind of a war, especially between the state, the government, the presidents even, and several presidents, not just one, because they don't understand a thing about this. They said, this is a gringo loco. He's buying land, huge chunk of land, like the state of Rhode Island, something like that. And what is the purpose? So everybody was saying, no, there is a hidden purpose. Imagine if Doug Tompkins at that time said something like, okay, I want to do forestry business, everybody will be happy at that time. Everybody will understand that. But saying, I want to do a conservation project was totally crazy, totally nuts. Nobody understand that for 20 years. And it's sad to say, but the fact that Doug Tompkins died, and then Carolina and Chris turned this into the legacy, was the creation of the national parks, was a huge shock. And you know what happened? The wave turned totally. And now everybody in Chile is saying, oh, this was great. I was wrong. Carolina has a number of people that attack her, attack the project, attack Doug and Chris, and even people like Yvonne Chouinard from Patagonia, because why you are doing this? But they were convinced. And I think that's the point, that if you are convinced that this is the right thing, at the end, you have to know that you are going to win, and you have to negotiate, and you will find conflicts. And I think the knowledge that Tompkins Conservation and Rewilding Chile has in terms of what are the good fights and what are the not so good fights is very important. And the way how they manage and survive for all these years reflect a huge importance on engaging the communities, doing the right lobby, and selecting the fights that are worth to fight. Because if you don't want to fight for the environment, nothing like this will happen. This is not about money. This is about conviction. And individual people like Doug, Chris, and Carolina, and a team of people saying this is good. And when gauchos at the beginning, most of them were not totally confident in the project, after 10 years, 20 years, when they see what happened, they said, okay, this is beautiful. This is amazing, And I think that's one of the big lessons. If you are not visionary, if you don't know that this is the right thing to do, you are not going to do it. And
so you have to be looking to the long term and kind of be planning strategically in decades versus in years of what you're trying to achieve. I mean, I think that's part of the story of purchasing land and then ultimately turning that over to the state, who then that prompted more conservation. I think we'd love to hear a little bit more about that aspect too, because you mentioned 1.2 million acres were donated from Tompkins Conservation to the state of Chile, and then Chile went around and then conserved 11 million acres. So what is that process between the public-private, relationships and negotiating that type of huge scale conservation?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that we never use negotiate, because we are never asking for something. And Doug was very particular about language, which I think it's great. So we never use negotiate, we use collaboration, because we didn't want anything in between in exchange for us. I think that we were always thinking, I think Doug, because Doug is a visionary, Doug and Chris are the visionaries here, and I think it was a transcendent decision when they went for national parks. Before we were making parks right at the beginning, then suddenly they said, no, this has to be national parks, returning the land to the public. That's a transcendent decision for sure. And I think it totally changed the way we looked at our work. You know, it was really it was thinking long term. And also the other thing is that in terms of how you trigger this, it's, as I say, we bought, you know, it's like a puzzle. We identify land that is pristine, mostly that is pristine. The valleys, because of use of bad practices, whatever, were trashed, and you would do restoration there, but mainly the high mountains and all of that were pristine. We identify the land. Always, we never bought public land from the country. We always bought from privates who bought it in the 1920s, speculating for lumber business or whatever. So we identify the private land, and we identify in this mapping all the public land that's around it. And we go with this proposal to the government. How about if I give you this, and if you in along this donation, you protect all this public land that's around this land that I'm giving you. So that's how we trigger more conservation. And actually, one of the like the cherry of the cake was that we bought, say, 60,000 acres long time ago in what is now Cahuéscar National Park, and we got like a 4 million acre national park, because we said, hey, all of this land is a national reserve. We give you this land. How about turning all of this in a national park? And the government did, you know. So it's and I think being bold, you know, Doug was way more bold than I am or any of us. And we always would say, Doug, are you sure you want to do it? You have to let them say no. You go for the biggest idea, for the biggest conservation possible. And it happened.
Wonderful. Juan, you have something you want to say, I can tell. Oh, you're muted.
I want to ask Carolina, because I don't know really how Doug engaged you in this. How was that meeting? You know, how, because these people were, and you were very young when you started on this. So how you become engaged in this dream, in this project?
Okay, I'll tell you a story. It's a good story. I'll tell you as short as possible. But the thing is that after I finished university, I started a rafting on a class 5 river in Chile that it was under a threat of being dammed, the Biobío River. And I started this company, and you know, and the first trip I ever sold, this was in 1990. The first person who walked in the door of that store was Doug Tompkins. So that was my first sale, and we became friends. And then after 5 years after that, in 1995, I started working with him. But in between, I became a part of that activist group opposing the dams, and he helped us with, you know, full ad page on the newspaper, etc. Activism.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We have a question from Maria de los Angeles Picone. She says, I wonder if Carolina could speak to the role of conservation of freshwater systems. I remember the Patagonia Sin Represas movement when I was in ASIN in 2014, but beyond advocacy, how are these parks envisioning the conservation of the ice fields, glaciers, lakes, and rivers? Thanks.
Okay. Bueno, the Patagonia Sin Represa was a big highlight in our history because of a you know, organization, because we are not only conservationists, but we have been activists, and that is when you get into trouble. But in 2007, we organized and became part of a huge coalition of over 80 organizations in Chile that opposed to 5 dams in Patagonian Baker and Pascua River. And we won those dams after 7 years of doing an incredible public education campaign, because that's what we call it, a public education campaign. There were no internet, no public social media. Half of the time we got social media, and then it became wider. But through really serious, informative, a public education campaign totally focused on facts and seriousness, we won. I mean, we had 80% of Chile opposing those dams, and it was just the best part, for sure, of my work within the organization, because it's so incredible that when you have the vision and the funds, because everybody needs to work and needs, a salary, you have the vision and the funds, you can change the destiny of a territory. And for me, that was an amazing experience. But answering the question beyond Patagonia sin represas, the category of a national park in Chile assures the protection of the water systems within the parks. That is why we go to this category. We have never made a national reserve in Chile, because in reserves you can do certain types of production. So we only go for this high category as Chile has subscribed to the Washington Convention, and therefore, no park has been DIGA-set in Chile. I'm not saying the system is perfect, it's really underfinanced, but there is a tradition of respecting national parks. We are part of the environmental movement, but as we are, although we have done this great deal, we are a very small organization. And so we do what we can. If a national park is under threat, be it its water courses of that, we will be there to defend it. But it's not that we are doing any more specific actions towards that purpose, besides protecting it with its highest category.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Juan, I see another question in the Q&A about that at the very bottom there. Maybe I'll pass that one off to you, because I think you've been involved in this as well.
I cannot see the Q&A.
Oh,
so,
okay, sorry.
so
I'll pose the question. We have a question that's asked about the relationship or balance that Rewilding Chile has with preserving natural spaces as they are. You describe those pristine spaces, as well as managing wildlife or those spaces to promote biodiversity. And you mentioned in your talk about active management, taking the pathway of changing conditions in those degraded landscapes to bring back species and promote more biological diversity. So what's the balance between those type of projects of the restoring versus preserving what's already pristine?
In general, in the case of Chile, we are very lucky that we don't have extinction like it happens with the parks we have created in Argentina. But we do have local extinctions or really diminished populations. So our balance is that I don't know if I call it our outcome, it would be that ecosystem that we want to protect is a complete ecosystem that has all the species that are clue for that ecosystem to work perfectly like nature is, right? In the case of Argentina, and I think it's a good idea, but that's Rewilding Argentina. You can look it up on the webpage. Fantastic organization. It's really bold. What Doug and Chris started there was the reintroduction of the jaguar. And the jaguar has been extinct for 80 years from these wetlands in northeastern Argentina. And so there were, to arrive to the jaguar, which only happens, a few years ago, at least 10 other species were introduced progressively since 1997 until the recent release of the jaguar. So as I say, there wasn't a balance there. The idea was to go for a complete ecosystem. And today, the Iberá wetlands, although there's only, maybe 10 jaguars on nature now, roaming free, the idea is that you arrive to a healthy population that can survive on its own. And for that, you need different genetics. Sometimes you bring a jaguar from Brazil, you bring a jaguar from neighboring countries or from neighboring provinces. That is what it takes to, what we do, for example, in Chile with the Darwin's Rhea, is what it takes to have a healthy population that will assure that they will survive in the long term.
And in all of those restored ecosystems, there's a monitoring program for those populations, and camera traps. And can you tell us a little bit more about like the, how you're measuring the progress for those populations?
Yes. Bueno, what are the techniques we use? We use people on the ground. We use people on the ground with different like high-tech communication systems, radio systems, radio collars. We put collars on different species, and we put camera traps, and we do constant monitoring. So those are our basic management and monitoring tools that we have. And we do inventories, like the census on guanacos happened just it's tomorrow. We have the census of guanacos in Patagonia National Park, and this is a collaboration between national parks, and we help them. We always help the public system. We do census on the pumas with the coloring. How many species are. We do census on the guanac, on the huemuls. We do census and monitoring. That is basically our tools for assuring the progressiveness of our programs.
Wonderful.
And we use a lot of collaboration, like I was saying, Pantera. With Pantera, we work with the Puma program and with the small cats. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to complement Carolina, you can find on Amazon a beautiful book named A Wild Idea, which is the story of Douglas Tompkins, etc. And are stories about the jaguar, but also about the parrots in Argentina. But Argentina is different because these parks are very close to areas that are heavily exploited, and Rewilding Chile is working in areas that is, something
highly
like
protected.
Yes, the nature protects itself. When a place is super remote, people do not arrive there, And I remember a conversation with Doug Tompkins. I was in the government, and everybody in the government is pushing for more roads, for example. And I said, I don't think that necessarily roads bring progress, because when you open roads, especially in these remote areas, what happened? Informal activity, they cut trees, they put litter. Also, just doing the road sometimes present a huge impact on the environment, And Doug Tompkins was a great pilot, so he flew. He was like Condor, he flew everywhere and took photographs. It was pretty scary for some people, because he opened the doors and started taking photographs without hands on the wheel, but he present to authorities these photos and say, hey, how you respond to this? So to be an activist, also you need to connect with the brain and with the stomach. So good documentation, people doing activism at different levels, is how these things happen. And one thing to remember, people like Doug Tompkins or even Chris, they started on this, thinking about this when they were in their 20s, not when they were in their 50s, they were walking the area. Tompkins, everybody think that he was in Chile in the 90s, in 2000. No, he was in Chile in the 60s, walking, kayaking, skiing, because he loved nature. And that's the origin of the passion. And then you need to create documentation, measurements, etc. And one of the beautiful things of the park, even 20 years ago, is there were a lot of young people. And I remember crazy gringos going there saying, hey, I want to help. This is my summer. How can be helpful here? You know, and these people build barns, help maintaining roads, etc., etc. So it's a huge collaborative effort that create this. So there are many ways to help, but the most important thing is that you have to be passionate about nature and conservation. If not, this will never work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that, unfortunately, we're at the end of our time, and I just want to start by thanking Carolina Morgado for joining us from Chile virtually today to share the amazing stories and work of your organization and what you've been part of for almost 30 years. And thank goodness for people like you. And I'm sure that you have inspired many who are on our webinar tonight to do similar work in other places. And Juan, thank you for providing like your personal perspective, coming as a governor of a region in Patagonia, and also the business piece of it and the law and policy. It's just been really fascinating to learn more about you and your relationship with the Patagonia landscape. And I want to also let people know that this is our first event, but not our last event. We will be having Frances Moore LePay come speak in person on Tuesday, November 15th at 7 p.m. in Fulton 511. And her talk is called Aligning with the Earth, What Will It Take? There will be a book signing for the 50th anniversary edition of Diet for a Small Planet and some of her other works on food and living democracy. So please join us for that. Also, visit the Institute for Liberal Arts website, look for the Rewilding Planet Earth under the events section, and you can find recordings of this event hopefully within about a week or so, as well as other past events if you missed any. So please stay in touch with us. This is intended to be an ongoing conversation about the much needed work that has to be done, but also the accomplishments like what's been done in Chile. So thank you, Carolina.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for being on for tonight. With that, we'll sign off.
Bye. Okay. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.